today's episode, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Cath Bishop. As a British rower, Cath competed in 3 Olympic Games, winning a silver medal in 2004. She served as a British diplomat for over 10 years. She's currently a leadership and culture consultant, and she is the author of the book, The Long Win. In today's episode, we dive into Cath's book, The Long Win, discussing the evolution of language around winning and losing, her personal experience of being in a win-at-all-cost environment. We talk about her time away from rowing, informing new perspectives of what winning and success means to her. And finally, we break down her 3 C's, talking about clarity, constant learning, and connection, and how we as coaches can implement her long win philosophy in our environments. Now, I know you're going to have so many great takeaways from this conversation, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Cath Bishop. Cath Bishop, welcome to the Being Champions podcast.
Great to be here.
Cath, I'm so excited for today. Ever since I read your book, The Long Win, I immediately fell in love with your content, your philosophy. I started to follow you on social media, your works where you contribute to The Guardian, and now you started your own podcast, the Inside Out Culture podcast with Colin Ellis. So it's an absolute honor to have you on today. Again, when I made this podcast, you were on the top of the list. I was like, I need to reach out to Cath. I know the value, the impact you're going to have on our listeners today.
Oh, that's really kind. I mean, we've been in touch for a while now, and I've really enjoyed our conversations because, I learn from people like you putting it into practice and, figuring it out. And, I'm always learning as well, because this isn't a prescriptive approach. It's about giving us tools and principles by which we can then go and really create what matters in our contexts.
Yes.
And so looking forward to doing some of that, creating, exploring today.
Yes, and I think today's topic is so important, Cath, because I was telling you before we hit record, I work in youth sports, and I've seen the shift in youth sports too, and how everything has been professionalized, where kids in high school now can get NIL deals, they can get paid to be an athlete. So it's one of those things where it's like we're creating more of this win at all cost mentality, where kids now want to get paid. They're missing the bigger picture. So that's why I wanted to dive right into your book and your philosophy and what you have learned along the way. So to open your book, Cath, you just talked about the language of winning and how much it has evolved. And you were hit with this question so many times throughout your career, like, hey, Cath, do you want to be one of the winners or do you want to be one of the losers? So my question, Cath, is how did we get here? How has the language of winning evolved to this almost binary approach where it's like we are just defined by whether we're a winner or a loser?
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, isn't it? And it's such a prevalent language in the playground, in the boardroom, as well as on the football pitch or the soccer pitch, as should I say.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts us into this binary box. And around that, people will say also, do you have a winner's mindset? Which are you? And it's a really can often be a really troubling question to think about. Who's in the loser's box and what do I have to do? And then once we start thinking like that, we're trapped and we're playing the game that's going to only go one way, which is ultimately not really explore what we're capable of in performance terms and not keep us healthy. And so, where does this binary language come from? I think there are a few influences, but it's worth thinking about actually the very original language meanings of winning come from, back in centuries ago. Two concepts, really. One around effort and hard work. Okay, you can see how that belongs in sport. And one around beauty and joy. And you go, you can see how that belongs in sport. So actually, let's just think about, I think those two things could help us quite a lot on and off the pitch. So along the way, we got drawn away from that, largely because of, I think, military metaphors that came into sport. And, early business language, manufacturing language, where things are very binary, where people were treated as, robots.
Yeah.
And, in a sort of world where you want people to be like machines, then okay, maybe you do that. But in a world where you want people to explore their own unique human potential and how they come together as a team to create something they can't do on their own, it's absolutely useless and
Yeah.
damaging.
Yeah.
And I think the other kind of word to bring here is competition. There's a very
Yeah.
subtle shift that the Latin word competere that it's derived from is about striving together.
Yes.
And somehow that became striving against. Now,
Yeah.
there are lots of increasing examples of where we see top sports people understanding that their rival, again, the origin of the meaning rival is about being sharing a stream with someone. You actually got
Hmm.
more in common with that person you're trying to beat at the American Open, the US Open, or the Australian Open. We've just been seeing that recently. Then, yeah, they're not your enemy. They're actually going to help you to perform at your best. You need them, otherwise there's
Yeah.
no competition, and they need you. So
Hmm.
we actually have more in common, and thinking like that can help us to actually raise our performance. Once we start talking about them as the enemy, then we actually start creating an atmosphere of fear. Well, that's not good for performance and it's not good for our mental health either.
Yeah.
And we start to sort of drag down what we're doing. That's defined by destroying somebody else rather than actually achieving what's possible in our sport. So, this definition of success, is it just destroying my opponent or is it exploring what I'm capable of? And if I can take my sport to the next level, ultimately, people like Federer and Nadal are great
Yes.
advocates of
Yeah.
how, the closest friends, my goodness, went in their sort of retirement letters to each other. It's all about how grateful they are, how they needed each other, how they challenged each other for sure. But then that helped them get to the next level. It's not about destroying each other. And they have an
Right.
unbelievable friendship because of what they shared on court together. It's way beyond some trophies. But you know what? It didn't hurt them either in terms of trophies. It enabled them to get close to what they were capable of. So, there's where we started was a healthier point, and then we've got warped into this sort of military beating, destroying others language. And as soon as you hear that, you're going into a fear-driven environment.
Yeah.
It used to be possible to win in a fear-driven environment. It used to be possible to maybe win by doing more training than others. But nowadays that isn't possible. And you're never going to get to your full ability. And I really experienced that. So anything that's creating fear in environment is going to limit performance, limit our thriving, ultimately limit our careers.
Yeah. And what I picked up on, Kath, is you said you went through that environment, right? So your first time around, you explained this in your book, your first time around going through the Olympic Games, the environment you were kind of brought up in was this win at all costs. Like you had to be tough. It was that old school, like no feelings, no emotions. Like talk to our listeners about that. How was that? How much did that affect you both mentally and physically?
Yeah, hugely.
Yeah.
Very damaging. Still, I kind of carry a part of that period where, my own sort of who was I, my own value was completely lost. I was
Yeah.
stuck in this game that actually was going against me. So you've got this, it doesn't make sense. We're
Yeah.
trying to be the best. We're trying to be the best we can be. We're trying to win some medals. And yet we're within a system that's actually constraining us. That's what frustrates me. Our definitions of so-called success are holding us back.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you're racing every day to just, be ranked higher than somebody next to you, well, then you don't have a meaningful relationship. You stop learning from them. They stop
Yeah.
learning from you. So again, our performance by being pitted against each other within the British rowing team, it started. We weren't making enough gains. It
Yeah.
was actually a good thing. If somebody else isn't doing well today, well, that's a good thing. But then when we come to race the rest of the world, we hadn't improved enough. We'd held back an element of being able to learn and push and challenge each other and support each other at the same time. It also meant that there was a sense of your own self-value being tied up in a result that you've got
Yes.
no control of, or only a partial control. And that's really dangerous. And we've seen
Yeah.
so many athletes who won at the highest level actually feel very unfulfilled because somehow they thought this was going to give them a sense of who they are, a status, a value. And of course, it's very empty. It's a very
Yeah.
empty place to be when you suddenly figure that out, whether you've reached the top step of the podium or not. And when I wasn't winning races, again, there was this sense that I, as a person, had less value. on the plane back from the competition than on the plane out because I hadn't
Yeah.
won a result. And what that does is actually distract you from getting better at your sport. And so again, we start to hear in Paris 2024 at the Olympics, you can hear athletes starting with much more of a long win narrative now when they don't win, because
Yeah.
not everyone can win. Spoiler,
Yeah.
that's sport.
Yeah.
There are no guarantees. That's why we love watching it. And actually, if you don't win, you've probably done some brilliant things in your performance and a sense of respect for the person who did. Maybe you were a part of pushing them somewhere they didn't know they could go. And that enables the athlete to avoid this big crisis, this big crash, this sort of whole, who am I, horrendous sense of loss of esteem, and enables them just to get on with, okay, I raced, I did my best for that day, and now I look and I learn and I go again.
Yeah.
So, from all sides, not being able to reach out for help when you're struggling, that's not a good place to be. And that was very difficult. And inevitably, my performances started to suffer. I ended up being overtrained and using up a lot of energy just to survive
Yeah.
rather than putting that energy into the sport I was doing each day.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like so many thoughts are going through my head right now, Kath, and I think about where our athletes, if we're in that environment, how much they struggle with their identity because I
Yeah.
either won or I lost, and they're stuck in this just being an athlete. The coaches, the environment don't see them as a full person. So no matter what happens, like they're just basing their identity on results, and it's so dangerous. And I know, Kath, you're a big fan of Brad Stolberg. And he
Yes.
talks about, so Brad talks about, and this is where athletes struggle is if they live in this one room house and everything is based on just being an athlete and basing their identity on winning or losing, like they're going to struggle. We see our athletes go through all this mental health crisis with depression rising, anxiety going up, especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha that I work with. Like it's kind of through the roof right now. It's kind of scary. But what Brad talks about is we have to live in that multi-room house. We
Yeah.
have to have those escape rooms. Whereas, like, if I'm not doing well as an athlete, I can go into the music room because I love music, or I can go read, I can go do these other things. But again, the environment we're creating sometimes, if we're in this win at all costs, we're just putting our athletes in one room and we see them struggling.
Yeah, I mean, the costs are huge,
Yeah.
and you are really sort of saying, I'm willing to sacrifice in terms of human thriving. I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the
Yeah.
sake of potentially winning, which we can't guarantee either, and is a very
Exactly.
temporary outcome.
Yeah.
And then what? Where's that going? And then even if you win, where is your kind of identity from that? Because what does that mean? What have you gone through? What sort of a person have you become? And
Yeah.
there's some really hard research around the need to have multiple identities. We are sisters, brothers,
Yeah.
parents, cousins, musicians, all of these other things that make up who we are. And what that gives us is perspective. Perspective is really critical to resilience, being able to see that adversity that comes, whether that's an injury, losing a race,
Yeah.
just really hard training sessions, seeing it within a wider perspective that, yeah, I've made a choice to be here. That's why I'm doing it. I've got an injury and actually, but it's not my whole life has stopped. This part of my life now, I'm going to have to do some different stuff to get it back again.
Yeah.
So, in terms of helping us be resilient, which is really required if we want to do sport to a high degree, then, again, it's not helping us. It's not helping
Yeah.
us to perform. It's making us more sort of brittle. And, why would we do that? Because we need to
Yeah.
be resilient to do sport well and to hopefully be able to do it, as long as our careers allow and to stay active the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's big. And the other piece that you're talking about is like once we win, like that feeling goes away. And I always try to tell our kids like it's really gonna last like a week, maybe 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, like once you're off that podium, like that's it. And if you go all in just to win a championship, right, you're creating this finite experience for yourself because it's like once you win, I don't need to get better. I won. I accomplished my task. I checked the box. But when we're going after this bigger thing, right? And I think about that word competitive greatness from John Wooden. He always talked about competitive greatness is being your best when your best is needed, right? And if you have more purpose and more drive and seeing the bigger picture, even if I win or even if I lose, I can still wake up tomorrow morning and become a better version of myself.
Yeah.
But again, as we're chasing just this wins, like we're putting ourselves in a box.
Yeah. I mean, I always think sort of with the medal, the value of it, I mean, in itself, or the trophy, whatever it is, it's a round piece of metal on a ribbon. The
Yeah,
value of it is in what it represents. And
yeah,
so every day we should be thinking about actually what is it that's going to represent that has a lasting value? Who are the community who are alongside me in the pursuit of this? Whether I win it or not, what
yeah,
are the relationships? What's the person I'm becoming? Who am I? What do I represent? And that for me was a real change. So when I came back after two Olympics that I'd failed, but definitely underperformed,
right.
hadn't reached what I was capable of in that system. One of the questions that sort of helped unlock things, as well as this, and we'll maybe come back to this performance versus result
Yeah,
psychology
okay.
difference. But the one of the questions the psychologist actually asked me and the coach was, what else are you going to gain if you win a medal? And
Yeah,
it's the same question. What else are you going to gain if you don't win a medal? I.e., the result isn't totally determining what you take away. Yeah,
yeah,
it's one thing you may or may not take away, but what are you going to gain that's going to go with you? Why is this worthwhile pursuing when the odds are really, really poor? And for me at that point, I didn't have a good record either, so like really
yeah,
bad sort of odds for me to do well.
yeah,
And that question, what else are you gaining? And I say that because I think it's a really useful question for us as coaches to step back. When a practice is hard, when we haven't been selected, what else
hmm,
are you gaining from being part of this squad, this program? And to really help us build that over time. I'm gaining a sense of who I want to become. I'm learning what resilience means. That is
yeah,
both reaching out for help, as well as pushing myself when things are difficult, or asking others to support me and challenging others. What's that mindset? How am I managing the challenges that come? What sort of mindset do I want to deliver? How do I want to react? How do I want to be when I lose a race? How do I
yeah,
want others to experience being a team with me? And to start building out that list. And that is such a powerful list, because those are the things that you are developing and you will have when you step off the podium or if you don't get to the podium. And the
yeah,
good news is they're going to give you as much help as they can also to getting towards the podium. But of
yes,
course, there are
yeah,
no guarantees, but they're
yeah,
definitely not going to harm. They're going to give you longevity. They're going to give you that extra sort of deeper intrinsic meaning, if you like, to
yeah.
what, to what's important. Um, yeah.
I love that. And I love how you just said what's important. And that's one thing I try to challenge our kids with. Like, and it's a very similar question. I ask them beyond winning, what do you actually want to accomplish
Yeah.
this year? Right. And it's just zooming out, right. And understanding like we all have these goals. I understand when we start a sport, everyone wants to win a championship. That's kind of a given. That's every team when they
Yeah.
start their journey.
And nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it at all. But I also tell them at the end of the year, 99% of the teams are going to end their season in a loss because only
Yeah.
one team or
Yeah.
one person can win.
Yeah.
So we got to see that big picture. We got to build out each
Yes.
other's system. And I
Yeah.
think this is a great transition, Kath, to talk about. You walked away from the sport for a little bit. You became a British diplomat. You were able to come back and you're able to fine tune your system and really start to work on this long win philosophy. So, what does that look like as far as zooming out, seeing the big picture? When you came back, how did that help you in your approach to being an athlete?
Yeah, so well, and again, I mean, it was really zooming out to a massive level of thinking about,
Yeah,
world politics,
yeah,
as opposed to thinking about how fast my boat was going backwards up a lake.
yeah,
So it was a real zoom out, and of course, I started to immediately see things in a different perspective.
yeah,
And, again, suddenly you're thinking, gosh, I wasn't really optimizing this aspect. And in particular, it showed me the importance of relationships, the power of relationships,
yeah,
because the world of diplomacy is one where you can only make change, you can only make progress through relationships and really investing in them. And I realized how in the sports world, how transactional we had been,
yeah, yeah,
and how actually I really hadn't built those relationships to help me. And that meant when I was struggling, or, at various points, even working with the people in that space, whether they're the nutritionist or biomechanics specialist, I hadn't really had conversations that had optimized what they could bring and
Yeah.
or had fun together in that intense environment where they were also being pushed to give their best.
Yeah.
And I realized the sort of the power of really investing in relationships for them, for, to be learning from each other, to feel like you're all on the journey together, and how powerful that was. And, one of the things that, I'd set then as what else do I want to achieve by coming back again was I want to create a different set of relationships, a different feeling of community, a sense that these are people I'll talk to after that Olympics, whether I win or not. And that, I want them to feel valued in that environment.
Yeah.
And then I think that will be part of others also kind of valuing me.
Yeah.
And, the sort of person I want to become, I'm thinking now about what do I want it to be like to work with me? And I think
Yeah.
before, in that win at all costs environment, I'd sort of been, not friendly and not kind of helpful, and almost like I've got to prove I'm something, not quite sure what that was. I'm going to be the best, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And, I hadn't been fun to work with. I wasn't thinking about what's their work experience, being part of this team. I just thought, oh, it's tough because it's tough for all of us. And that's a nonsense. It's not getting the best out of them. It's not getting the best out of me. And we are
Right.
all part of a bigger community. So that sense of building the community became a really key piece. And then I think the other thing that shifted was this sports psychology insight that exists across sport, but sometimes not really lived.
Yeah.
This division between performance and results.
Yeah.
And this really helped me. This sense of I want the result that hasn't changed. It doesn't matter whether you're wherever you are in sport. Yeah, we want it, and that's fine. Same in a business world, same in an education world. We shouldn't
Yeah.
stop wanting these things, and that's really important. People say, "Oh, are you anti kind of excelling?" And it's like, no, no, no. I want to really explore what I'm capable of, and
Yeah.
not constrain myself. And
Hmm.
so I want an environment that allows me to do that. So those goals are there, but you have to then stop and let go of that because I can't control them. That in the future, there are lots of other factors that will affect them, including luck and, weather and
Yeah.
referees and
Uh-huh.
all of these things that kind of make it also exciting because it's not predictable who will win all the time.
Yeah.
And I need to think about my performance, which I'm continually developing. Yeah, that infinite game. How fast can I make a boat go? How well can I work with others in that crew with me? And how can we continually learn? And then that has, every performance ingredient as part of it. So, my mindset, my recovery, nutrition, and the obvious fitness stuff, technique
Yeah.
stuff. And it becomes about basically improving all of those. And there's no limit. There's no day where I finish improving those. There'll be a
Yeah.
day where I race at the Olympics, and that may or may not be the end. But essentially, I'm always exploring, how can I improve? And so success is not about I'm a winner or not, or even talking
Yeah.
about it. It's
Yeah.
actually how much can I improve each day so I get as close as I can to what I'm capable of. And
Yeah.
even when I've done that, I'll probably take a step back and go, yeah, I think there's more things that I could do because we are so capable of learning and adapting. Like that is a part of our human condition, an amazing part that separates us out from everything else on the planet, all the other
Yeah.
living creatures. And so we should be really, that's our best hope for performance,
Yeah.
to keep pushing the boundaries. Is that sense of continually developing our mind, our body, our emotions, our understanding of how we connect with others. And really that is that learning mindset helped me so much. So, I turn up in a day and might have gone fast or not so fast or be struggling with an aspect of technique. But, I'm not thinking, oh God, well, am I good enough to win the gold medal or not? Don't know that. It's 3 years away or 3 days away or 3 months away. But
Yeah.
have I improved today? Have I really committed to learning? Have I really listened to others in the environment? Have I helped them improve? And that, when I went home each day, felt so different from the fear driven, where am I in the rankings? Who did I beat? Who have I got to get up and beat
Yeah.
tomorrow?
Yeah.
Which was so counterproductive and actually pretty miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. And listening to that, Kath, when you were talking about the relationship and connection, right? There's a great story when Steve Kerr, the Golden State Warriors head coach, when he first took the job, they asked him, like, obviously the Golden State Warriors took off under his tutelage, but they asked him, like, how did you do it? Was it the tactics? Was it the strategies? He said, no, the most important thing I won was I won the relationship game. I took
Wow,
the
great.
time to get to know, and Steve Kerr always came off the bench. So Steve understood what those eight, nine,
Yeah.
10 guys were going through too. So he was able to connect and bring that team together. He said that was the most important thing I did was winning the relationship game. And as you were talking, all I could hear was your three C's kept coming up in
Yeah.
the last conversation. So you're talking about clarity, you're talking about constant learning, and you're talking about connection. So the big thing for me, Kath, is we always talk about it as coaches. We're the ones that create the experience. We create the environment. You actually wrote a great article with Owen Eastwood about, 70% of our behaviors is based on the environment. So can you
Yeah.
talk to our coaches, Kath? How do we take those three C's and can you kind of define the three C's for us
Mm.
again? How do you take those three C's and how do we build that into our environment? Because again, this is about bigger than just winning. This is about creating the
Yeah.
best versions of ourselves. So talk to
Yeah.
our coaches about that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you can sort of hear them coming out because the three C's are a way of thinking,
Yeah,
a way of showing up, a way of behaving, a way of connecting with others. They're not a sort of artificial tick, tick, tick thing.
yeah, right.
And so this is about clarity, constant learning, and connection. And they all interlink with each other as well. But if we've got these thought processes going on sort of all the time, clarifying what matters. So you've got a problem here, or someone says, oh my goodness, I don't know if we're going to win or not, and all of that stuff. I step back and I go, hang on, let's clarify what matters here, or
Yeah,
what else matters. That's important, but what else matters here? Is there a bigger game to play?
yeah,
Particularly today, most days when we're not about to win a championship or something, let's not lose sight of that. So that clarity of what matters, what else matters, and it's often those slightly unmeasurable areas of relationships,
yeah,
community, belonging, and that connection within that. The constant learning comes back to really that performance versus results piece. Yeah,
yeah,
my job here is to learn, but to learn in lots of ways, not just the technique side, not just that kind of hard side, but learning about myself, learning about behaviors that how they're impacting others, behaviors that I might think are really good, but if I really look at it, they aren't helping others, and I maybe need to modify some things. Learning
yeah,
about my emotions, my reactions under pressure, my reactions to people who rub me up the wrong way, all of that kind of learning is part of that approach. So I'm
yeah,
continually developing how I'm showing up and, accepting and kind of open to, the feedback and thinking about what's my impact, not just what's my intentions.
yeah.
And yeah, it's connections at the end of the day, isn't it? I love that quote. I hadn't heard that before. I like, obviously I think Steve Kerr is
Yeah,
someone
Steve Kerr is great.
we really admire.
Yeah,
Yeah, I won the relationship game. Yeah, if you want to win something, that's a good game to play.
yeah,
And sometimes it's quite useful to bring that sort of performance, ambitious language into things. People say, "Oh, you somehow I'm anti-winning." No, no, no. I want to be more ambitious than just trying to sort of cross the line first. I want to cross
yeah,
the line first and then have something really valuable that lasts beyond that.
yeah.
Do you know what? It's valuable even if I don't cross the line as well, because I can't guarantee that. So it's about that sort of, yeah, really the bigger game that we try and play.
Yeah, I think the big piece, Kath, is as I hear you talk about it, is I think this all kind of starts with us as coaches, right? And oftentimes we coach the way we are coached. And when I grew up, I grew up in that environment, this win at all costs environment, or you have to be tough, you have to suppress your emotions, all that stuff. That's how I grew up. So for me, like a big piece of my evolution and transition as a coach was understanding who I really wanted to be as a coach. How do I want to show up for my kids and having the self-awareness. So I think to build this out in our environment, we have to go through these three C's as coaches first.
Absolutely, hugely. I was doing some work actually at a coaches conference at the weekend, really
Yeah,
leaning into this theme of connections.
yeah,
And there's some great work Sophia Jowett does, a professor over here
yes,
at
yeah,
Loughborough University, around this coach-athlete relationship and reshaping it and rethinking it, where she was saying that we become who we are through our relationships,
yeah,
and that both the athletes become who they become, and often particularly if we've got young people we're coaching, through the relationship we create with them, and we're having a hugely formative role because of
yeah,
that power we have in the
yeah,
environment. And also we are becoming that person that's, as a result of the relationships we have with others. So to see, therefore, relationships as one of our really key aims and goals, to be setting ourselves relationships about what's the impact we want to have on others. How do we want to leave people feeling when they go home from a practice?
Yeah.
And that sense of who do I want to become as a coach in 5 years' time? What do I want to look back on?
Yeah.
Because people won't remember you for the trophies.
Yeah.
They will
Uh-huh.
remember you for the stories, what you did under pressure, how you helped them when they needed it, how
Yeah.
you noticed something about them wasn't right and stepped in and supported, or how you just made it fun in the toughest of moments. It's those things
Yeah.
that people will notice. It's that impact on others. And so, for me, I just would bring that right into the clarity, to start clarifying those things, to be setting goals around that stuff. And when
Yeah.
you've got, the training program, whatever's on that, which we tend to put too much emphasis on,
Yeah.
for
Oh, yeah.
me, then you've got to put the people into that and
Yeah.
say, what are the relationships we want to form in the course of running this training program? How are these key sessions here? How are we going to use those to develop who we are and how our athletes are? How are
Yeah.
we going to use the conversations we're having each practice? Probably quite small moments, but
Yeah.
each of those is a shaping moment. And we need to be as thoughtful and planning about those as we do about, whatever the gym session is and how many lifts weights we want to lift. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of putting that clarity of what matters, and then putting that into the session,
Yeah.
and having that sort of improvement. What are the things I want to do better today? What are my goals as a coach?
Yeah.
And to frame that in terms of impact on others.
Yeah. I love it. And that makes me think about the constant learning. And I use this question, Kath, ever since you posed it to us. And I think I was with the True Athlete Project. You were doing a session with them,
Oh yeah.
and you posed this question, and it really got me thinking. It was, when was the last time you tried something new? And immediately, we are like creatures of habits, right, Kath? And it's like I was sitting there and I was like, I could not think of something, because it's like I was so stuck in my ways. I do everything the same every single day. And it's almost like we create this empathy gap between coaches and athletes, because I've been coaching 23 years. Sometimes I forget what it's like being an athlete. So
Yeah.
immediately when you ask
Yeah.
that question, like it just got my wheels turning.
Like, it's my favorite question. I used it with the coaches at the weekend as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to know it's coming soon, but that's okay, because
Yeah.
the reason I ask it is not for the answer, it's for the thought process
Yeah.
of checking in on ourselves and
Yeah.
thinking, am I on automatic pilot here?
Yeah.
And actually, the when we show up to something, so I want people to remember what it is like, exactly whatever it can be small things, trying a new recipe, it doesn't have to be radical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but in that moment, there's also a real vulnerability. There's a real alchemy between the vulnerability of doing something new, and I don't know how it's going to go, probably not
Yeah.
great for the first time,
Yeah.
but also that excitement of growth. And
Yeah.
those two things are
Yeah.
really valuable to have in our minds as coaches, actually
Yeah.
as leaders, actually as athletes, all the time, to embrace both of those, because you've got to be a little bit vulnerable today, because you don't know where this session is going to go. You might get asked a question you've not been asked before. Something might play out you've never had play out before. And so you can't have all the answers going into this. But how exciting is that? Because then you'll learn as a coach. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll connect with the people in that space in a different way as you discover how this new challenge is going to unfold. Or simply getting to know people beyond the stuff you already know about them. All of these things, it's that mix of vulnerability, nervousness, plus an opportunity for growth
Yeah.
that gives us a mindset that is then a constant learning mindset.
Yeah.
So we've got to show up with that. We can't demand that of athletes, but
Yeah.
not
Right.
have that ourselves, because otherwise we won't be asking these questions
Yeah.
that we want to ask in order to think about what's our impact on others, how are people responding to me. And so, yeah, I think how we show up is a big piece. And again, I'd encourage coaches to be putting as much time into planning that
Yeah.
as anything else. And
Yeah.
again, like if I'm doing a talk, it's not just giving the information about the book, it's actually how can I help you come in a mindset where you're going to be
Yeah.
open to what's in the book. And so I ask those questions if I'm doing sessions, because I know it's not just about what I'm saying, it's about, how you turn up to that.
Yeah.
And if we can get ambitious about that, then we really kind of increase the performance opportunities.
Yeah, I love that part. It's just, it's for me, it always comes back to that how, Kath. And again, we're great. We know all the what's, we know the tactics, we know the strategies we want to do, but then we lose sight of that how. And another cool one, Kath. So piggyback
Yeah.
off of your question of when was the last time you tried something new? I do a lot of work with his name is Trevor Reagan, and he has his company, the Learner Lab. And one cool thing and one cool exercise he does is what he calls the untalent show, where he challenges student athletes or he challenges coaches like, hey, for the next 2 weeks, I want you to pick a skill that you're not good at. And I want you
Yeah.
to try it for these next 2 weeks because I want to put you back into the process of learning and
Yeah.
challenge and
Yeah.
growth. So it's a great way to
Yeah.
piggyback off of that question is just go through
Love
an
that.
untalent show and it
Yeah.
immediately connects you with your athletes. Like this is what learning is.
Yeah, and it connects us with that process because we're
Yeah.
so quick to jump to the outcome. I want you to get better at this and it looks like this. But actually, if we're coaching, we need to be coaching through the process before you know what it looks like. So,
Right. Exactly.
it makes sense, doesn't it, that we need to be ever better as coaches with helping that process. But we tend
Yeah.
to be going, look, it looks like this. This is where we want to get to. This is what good looks like. Let me show you
Yeah.
another video of someone doing it at an elite
Yeah.
level. And I always think that's a bit mad
Yeah.
because you're almost just highlighting I'm not there
Yeah.
rather than getting in with me where I am and
Yeah.
thinking, I wonder what that feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the big piece is meeting our kids or meeting our athletes where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And too often we go into an environment and we have these expectations, and then we get frustrated at coaches because the kids are not meeting the expectations. And especially with us working with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like it has to be more of this collaboration. We have to connect more. We have to win this relationship game because our kids have so much access to information, but they don't know what is the good or bad information. So we have to spend more meaningful times with our kids and build that connection and bridge that gap between just being an athlete and seeing them as people first.
So that really reminds me of one of the things that that I learned a lot about in that diplomatic world where we were doing lots of negotiations. I
Yeah.
mean, most conversations are negotiations.
Yeah. It really is. Yep.
And the big sort of shift always, is that you walk into a room, you've got people sort of on the other side, as it were. They're thinking differently from you, and we have to get on the same side as that person. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean we agree with everything they say, not at all. But we have to make sure the issue isn't between us, but that we are both looking at it. We both
Yes.
want this issue to be solved. Now, we might
Yep.
have opposing views on how you do it, but as soon as we put the issue, sort of both of us, against the issue, if you like, opposite it, then it changes. We're alongside people. So I think that concept of alongside is a powerful one. And
Yes.
I really noticed this because, again, like in the rowing world, people talk about wanting to connect with athletes. But if I took a snapshot in every rowing club or, just off the dock before you get on the boat, it's the coach here standing opposite the athletes.
Right.
And that signals something very different from I'm alongside you. And so
Yeah.
physically positioning yourself alongside is important. It feels different. And it's almost
Yep.
a bit of our power play sometimes. I'm opposite you, you're all staring, listening at me. I've got
Yeah.
I've got the answer. I've got the magic to what happens today or after a session I'm debriefing and telling you what I think. And it creates a distance. It makes it not very safe for them often to raise a question or challenge or ask something. It also means you're not really connecting with where they're at. And they're sort of
Yeah.
looking at you over there, almost thinking, almost like being on the opposite side of the riverbank in sometimes,
Yeah.
even though you're
Yeah.
not physically, but you are. You put this gap between you. So get alongside, physically stand alongside, probably
Yes.
the team will
Yeah.
shift. Initially, they'll go, oh, no, my teacher, my coach, they're opposite me. But
Right.
it's so powerful to play with things like that. I want to be alongside. Let's stand differently.
Yes. Yeah, we use the power of the circle, Kath, where when you're in a circle, no one's in front, no one's in back,
Yeah.
everyone is side by side. And really, when you're standing in that circle, it's understanding together this is how we reach our best. And CC Kraft, she's a mental performance coach for the Phillies. I was just talking to her, and she stole this from the military. She says we have to coach by, with, and through our athletes and
Nice.
creating that environment. But
Yeah.
Kath, I think I could literally talk to you all day about this, Kath, but we are running short on time. But I just wanted to get a final thought from you. How can we as coaches really embrace this long win philosophy and really bring it to life, because I feel like it's so important, especially with this shift in youth sports, and where sports is trending to more this professionalization and all this madness where everything's about money, and we're losing sight of what's really important. So any final thoughts to wrap up this conversation? I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I actually added in the second edition last year, was to start thinking about success metrics in
Yeah,
terms of three things: story, experience, and impact.
yeah,
So yes, we're aiming to win whatever the championship is, but actually, let's get ambitious about the story we're going to create in the pursuit of that, the impact we want to have on each other and on ourselves as coaches, and the experience we want to create for ourselves and for others. And I think we can bring that into each session as well. What's the
yeah,
story that, the kids are going to go home after this session and tell their parents? They're not going to talk about the drills they did.
no,
They're
nope,
not going to talk about whatever the score of that game was.
yeah,
They're going to go, oh, really felt energized today, or I really felt I was really helped by this. I really feel I'm making progress in this, or I don't, or I'm really struggling and I don't know who to go to for help. So think about, sort of tune into those stories and what's the story you want to create, and therefore make sure that's actually governing how you show up through the session. So story, impact, experience, these are the lasting success metrics that
yeah.
will also help you in pursuit of the championship as well.
Yeah. I love that, Kath. And I always talk about story. So I'm so glad you talked about story. I always say that winning should only be part of our story, not the end of it. And just recognizing like we have an opportunity to write this amazing story. But again, it's about how we're showing up and being intentional and seeing the bigger picture and understanding like this world is so much more than just winning and losing, and to find the best versions of ourselves, and collectively we have to do that, because that's what brings the best out of all of us.
Yeah. Let's explore what we're capable of together. What's
Yeah,
possible? What's possible together? That was a phrase like we had in my sort of final Olympics. Yeah, don't focus on what's wrong. We can't control everything here, but let's keep exploring what's possible together. Possibility, I think, is actually much more ambitious than winning. But
yeah,
it includes winning along the way if that's, if it's possible. But it includes so many other things as well.
yeah. Well, Kath, I'm leaving this conversation like crazy inspired. I'm ready to go back to work here. So I can't thank you enough, Kath. Again, when I was forming this podcast, and I know we've talked over the last 2 years, I knew I wanted to have you on because of the impact and the value you're going to add. So I can't thank you enough for being on the Being Champions podcast.
Oh, Matt, I really enjoy chatting all the time, and look forward to kind of continuing our long wing conversations on and off the podcast.
Yes, definitely. We will catch up soon, Kath. Appreciate you.
Thanks very much. Bye bye.
All right. Thanks. Hey, I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Kath. I'm sitting here with so many takeaways, but I think my biggest takeaway was what Kath was talking about at the end, and how we can add this success metrics within our environment. And she talked about this concept of thinking about our story, thinking about the experience we are creating, and what type of impact we're having every single day. So I think we need to sit back and kind of look at how are we defining success, and focusing on what's really important to us. So that's our challenge this week: is sit down, take some time. What is really important to you? How are you defining success? Not what society says is success, but how are we defining it for ourselves in order to create the best story, the best experience, and to have the greatest impact. With that, I can't thank you enough for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time on the Being Champions podcast.